If you have a bank account with JP Morgan, you need to stop what you are doing and watch this right now. Not later, not after you finish whatever else you are working on. Right now. Because what happened to thousands of JP Morgan customers in recent weeks is not a data breach. It is not hackers cracking sophisticated security systems in some server room. It happened through a text message, through a phone call, through a calm, professional voice on the other end of the line that gave every possible reason to trust it. And the people who lost their money, in some cases their entire life savings, did not do a single thing that any reasonable, trusting person would not have done in exactly the same situation. One customer lost $212,000. Another lost $87,000. A retired teacher lost $143,000 she had spent 31 years building. Gone. Not through any failure of JP Morgan's security systems from the outside. Gone because the fraud was designed to use those security systems against the very customers they were built to protect. And when those customers filed their claims, JP Morgan denied them. The bank's written responses used language that is becoming disturbingly familiar to consumer protection attorneys across the country. Language about customers failing to take appropriate steps to protect their accounts. Language that puts the responsibility on the victim, while the institution that built the exploited system walks away. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how this scam works at every single step, why it is so devastatingly effective, what federal consumer protection law and the court decisions that have interpreted it actually say about who bears responsibility when it happens. And most importantly, the exact steps you need to take right now, before this ever reaches your account, to protect yourself, and what to do if it has already happened. Subscribe right now before we go any further, because the information in this video could be the difference between keeping your life savings and losing them. Hit that like button so this reaches the people who need it most. Let us get into what is actually happening to JP Morgan customers right now. The pattern emerging across these cases is not random. It is not a collection of unrelated incidents. It is a coordinated, professional-level operation targeting JP Morgan account holders specifically. And it follows the same sequence with a precision that tells you this is not amateur work. This is organized. This is sophisticated. And it is specifically engineered to exploit the gap between how banking security systems work and what ordinary customers understand about them. Let me walk you through one case in detail, because the specifics matter enormously for understanding why this works and why it is so hard to protect yourself against without knowing exactly what to look for. A customer we will call Margaret had been a JP Morgan customer for 19 years. She kept her savings and her checking in the same institution she had trusted for nearly 2 decades. Her balance reflected a lifetime of careful decisions. Just over $212,000 across 2 accounts. She was not wealthy by any extravagant measure. It was the accumulated result of decades of working, saving, and discipline. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, she received a text message. The text appeared to come from JP Morgan Chase. It was a fraud alert, the kind of routine security notification that banks send regularly, and that most of us have received at some point, without incident. Did you authorize a $42 purchase from an unfamiliar merchant in another state? A small amount, a low alarm question, the kind of thing that might genuinely have been an accidental charge or a forgotten subscription. Margaret said no, she had not authorized it. That was the right answer. And then her phone rang. The caller ID displayed JP Morgan Chase. The name and number looked exactly as they should. On the line was a man who introduced himself as a senior fraud specialist from JP Morgan's account protection team. His voice was measured, calm, professional. Not rushed, not aggressive, not remotely threatening. He explained that Margaret's account had flagged suspicious activity and that the fraud team was reaching out proactively to help her secure her account before any further exposure occurred. He needed to verify her identity before he could put the protective measures in place. Standard procedure, he said. He would send her a verification code by text, and she would simply need to read it back to him to confirm she was the account holder. Margaret received the text. It came from a JP Morgan number. It contained a 6-digit code. She read it to the man on the phone. He thanked her, told her the verification was complete, and said her account was now being reviewed. He would follow up within 24 hours with an update. He called the next day, and the day after that. Each time there was a new development in the review. Each time he needed to re-verify her identity. Each time a code arrived from JP Morgan's system, and Margaret read it back. The calls were spaced out, never urgent. Always professional, always reassuring. 8 days after the first text message, Margaret logged into her account to pay a bill. The balance showed a number she did not recognize. She called the branch. The branch manager pulled up her records and told her that 6 wire transfers had gone out of her accounts over the previous 8 days. The total was $212,000, every dollar she had. She had never authorized a wire transfer in her life. She did not know how wire transfers worked. She certainly had not initiated any. JP Morgan told her to file a police report and submit a fraud claim. She did both the same afternoon. 6 weeks later, JP Morgan denied her claim. The denial letter said that their review found the transactions appeared to have been authorized by the account holder and that the bank had no obligation to reimburse losses resulting from the customer's sharing of security credentials with third parties. Margaret had not shared her password. She had not shared her PIN. She had not given anyone her account number or her social security number. She had read 6-digit codes from text messages back to a man she had every reason to believe was her bank. Her entire life savings was gone. JP Morgan kept the denial in place. Now, let me break down exactly what happened at each layer of this operation and why it worked so precisely. Because this is not something that happened because Margaret made careless decisions. This worked because it was designed by people who understand banking security systems deeply and who built every step of the scam to exploit those systems from the inside. The first layer was the text message, and here is what virtually everyone gets wrong about this. The text message was real. It was an actual JP Morgan fraud alert generated by JP Morgan's own security systems. The scammers did not fake it. They did not replicate it. They triggered it. Before they ever contacted Margaret, they had already obtained partial access to her account information through means that likely included dark web purchase data from one of the many large-scale data breaches that have exposed hundreds of millions of Americans' financial information over the past decade. Using that information, they initiated a small test transaction, just enough to trigger JP Morgan's legitimate fraud detection system into sending an authentic alert to Margaret's phone. The small dollar amount was deliberate. $42 does not produce panic. It barely registers as more than a minor inconvenience. The entire purpose of that first step was to get a real JP Morgan security message into Margaret's hands before they ever called her, so that when the call came, the security alert would feel like the beginning of a legitimate fraud response process. The second layer was the phone call and the caller ID. What Margaret saw displayed on her phone when the call came in was JP Morgan Chase's legitimate customer service number. This is caller ID spoofing, and it requires almost no technical sophistication or expense to accomplish. Software and services that allow anyone to display any number they choose on a call recipient's phone are widely available and cheap. The number shown has nothing whatsoever to do with where the call is actually originating. When your phone shows JP Morgan Chase's name and number, it means someone chose to display that information. It does not mean JP Morgan Chase is calling you. But the caller ID was only part of what made this call believable. The man on the phone was also carefully calibrated in every aspect of how he presented himself. No urgency, no pressure, no fear tactics. Calm, professional, patient, genuinely helpful in tone. He called back multiple times over more than a week. He maintained a consistent persona and a consistent narrative. He never pushed, he never threatened, he waited. He built a week-long relationship with a customer who had every reason to trust what she was experiencing. This patient, relationship based approach is the evolution of phone fraud, and it is specifically designed to defeat the defenses that awareness campaigns have built around aggressive, pressuring scam calls. People know to hang up on someone who is pressuring them. Nobody tells you to hang up on someone who is calm, helpful, professional, and calling you back politely over a period of days. The third layer is the verification trap, and it is the most technically elegant and most devastating part of this entire operation. Margaret did not give anyone her password. She did not give her PIN. She gave 6-digit codes that arrived in text messages from JP Morgan. That is all she did. But those codes were not identity verification tools. They were wire transfer authorization codes. Every time the scammers initiated a wire transfer out of Margaret's account, JP Morgan's security system did exactly what it is supposed to do. It generated a one-time code and sent it to the account holder's phone number to confirm that the account holder was authorizing the transfer. Margaret's phone received those codes from JP Morgan's own system. Margaret read those codes to the man on the phone. And from JP Morgan's system's perspective, the account holder had just confirmed authorization for a wire transfer 6 times. The system recorded 6 valid authorizations for 6 wire transfers because 6 valid authorization codes were entered. Margaret thought she was helping verify her identity to a fraud investigator who was protecting her account. She was actually approving the theft of her account's entire contents, one transaction at a time. The fourth layer was the wire transfers themselves, 6 of them over 8 days. The largest was over $48,000 in a single transaction. Wire transfers are the preferred instrument of this kind of fraud for a specific and critical reason. They are designed to be final. A wire transfer is not like a debit card purchase that can be disputed or a credit card charge that can be reversed. When a wire transfer clears, the money moves to another account, often through a chain of intermediary accounts that can span multiple countries, and recovering it requires a level of investigative coordination that is genuinely difficult, even for large financial institutions with dedicated fraud recovery teams. For an individual trying to recover stolen funds through their own efforts, it is extraordinarily difficult. The finality of wire transfers is not a design flaw from the scammer's perspective. It is the entire point. The fifth layer is the denial. And this is where you need to understand the legal framework that governs what happened. Because without understanding it, you cannot understand why JP Morgan denied the claim, whether that denial was legally sound, and what options exist for people in Margaret's situation. The primary federal statute governing electronic fund transfers, including wire transfers, is the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. The courts, including federal appellate courts and the Supreme Court in related consumer financial protection cases, have interpreted this statute in ways that create a painful and counterintuitive outcome for fraud victims in exactly the situation Margaret found herself in. The critical legal distinction the courts have drawn is between 2 categories of transaction. The first category is an unauthorized transaction, meaning a transfer that occurred without any participation or involvement by the account holder. The second category is an authorized transaction, meaning a transfer where the account holder participated in the authorization process, even if that participation was the product of deception. When Margaret read those verification codes back to the man on the phone, she was participating in the authorization process for each wire transfer. From every technical and legal vantage point the system has access to, those transactions were authorized. The codes came from her device. They were entered by someone to whom she provided them. JP Morgan's system recorded valid authorizations. Under the framework the courts have applied to the Electronic Fund Transfer Act, that authorization, even if obtained through sophisticated deception, creates significant legal cover for the bank's denial. The burden of proving that a transaction was unauthorized falls on the consumer. When the consumer participated in entering or providing the authorization, meeting that burden is extraordinarily difficult. JP Morgan's denial letter was not arbitrary cruelty. It was the application of an established legal framework that consumer protection advocates, financial regulators, and members of Congress have argued for years is fundamentally inadequate to address the realities of modern fraud. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has pushed for stronger protections that would shift more liability to banks in social engineering fraud cases. Those efforts have faced significant opposition from the banking industry. As of right now, the legal reality is that if you participated in the authorization process for a transfer, even because you were expertly deceived into doing so, the bank has a legally defensible basis to deny your fraud claim. This does not mean the bank is right. It means the bank is operating within a legal framework that currently exists and that urgently needs to change. But until it changes, prevention is not just important, it is the only reliable protection most consumers have. There is no version of this where you trust the bank to make you whole after the fact. The legal framework, as interpreted by the courts, creates too much space for denial in exactly these circumstances. So let me give you the specific, actionable steps you need to take right now to protect yourself, and then what to do if it has already happened. The first rule, and it is absolute: never respond to a bank fraud alert by replying to the text or by calling any number that appears in the text or that a caller gives you. Even if the text genuinely came from your bank, even if the question seems completely routine. If you receive a fraud alert and you want to act on it, you call the number printed on the physical back of your debit card, the one that was on the card before any of this started. You call that number and no other. You do not click any link in any message. You do not reply to any text. You do not call any number someone else gives you. You call the number you already had. The second rule: never trust an inbound call, regardless of what the caller ID displays. Caller ID is not a verification system. It is a display field, and anyone can put anything in it. JPMorgan is not going to call you unsolicited to help you secure your account. No legitimate bank operates that way for this kind of security response. If someone calls claiming to be from your bank, regardless of how professional they sound, regardless of what the caller ID shows, regardless of how calm and patient and helpful their approach is, you hang up. You then call your bank yourself at a number you look up independently from a source you trust, not a number the caller gives you, not a number from the text message that preceded the call, a number you find yourself. The third rule is the most important one, and it is non-negotiable. Never share a verification code with anyone for any reason. One-time codes that arrive in text messages or email are not identity verification tools. They are transaction authorization keys. They exist specifically so that your bank can confirm the person making a change or initiating a transaction is actually you. When you give that code to someone else, you are handing them the authority to authorize anything on your account that the code covers. No bank employee will ever legitimately ask for a verification code you received. Not for identity verification, not for account security, not for any reason. If someone asks for a verification code you received, they are attempting to commit fraud. End the call immediately and call your bank at a number you already have. The fourth rule: set up the most restrictive wire transfer controls your bank offers, and do it today, not after you finish this video. Most banks, including JPMorgan, offer options to require in-branch approval for any wire transfer above a certain amount, meaning no wire can go out without someone physically present at a branch authorizing it. You can add a verbal passphrase that must be provided to a branch employee before any wire is processed. You can set daily transfer limits that prevent large amounts from moving in a single day. Most customers never set any of these controls because they never think they will need them, and because the bank does not proactively push customers to set them. Set them now. Call your bank today and ask specifically about wire transfer security controls and what the most restrictive options are. The fifth rule: separate your large balances from your everyday spending account. Do not keep your life savings in the same checking account you use for daily transactions. Keep a modest balance in your primary checking account for routine expenses. Keep your savings in a separate account, ideally at a different institution, with stronger access requirements and no wire transfer capability enabled by default. If the scammers get into your checking account and your checking account has $2,000 in it, the damage is devastating, but survivable. If it has your entire life savings in it, The damage may be catastrophic and permanent. Now, let me tell you what to do if this has already happened to you, because time is the most critical variable in whether any recovery is possible. Call your bank immediately using the number on the back of your card. Do not use any number you received recently in a text or from a caller. Ask specifically for the fraud department and use the words wire recall. Tell them you need a wire recall attempt initiated on any transfers made within the past 72 hours. Wire recalls work by contacting the receiving bank and requesting that the funds be returned before they are further dispersed. They do not always succeed, particularly for transfers that have already moved through intermediary accounts. But they have the highest probability of success when initiated quickly, and every hour you wait reduces that probability. Go to a branch in person immediately and escalate to the most senior person you can reach. Do not accept a phone resolution. Physical presence changes the dynamic, and branch management has access to escalation pathways and decision-making authority that customer service lines often do not. Ask specifically what options exist for wire recall, what fraud holds can be placed to prevent further transfers, and what the formal process is for filing a FRANT claim that will be reviewed at a senior level. File a police report the same day. Bring printed documentation of the fraudulent transfers. Banks require a police report number before they will process most fraud claims, and the report is essential documentation for everything that follows. Do not skip this step under any circumstances, even if you believe the police cannot do much. The report creates an official record, and the record matters. File a formal complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau at consumerfinance.gov. This creates a regulatory record that JPMorgan is legally required to respond to within a defined timeframe. It does not guarantee recovery. It does force a formal review, creates documentation that can support further action, and puts regulatory pressure on the bank in ways that private claims often do not. Banks take CFPB complaints seriously, and a formal complaint from a fraud victim often produces a more thorough internal review than the initial claim process generates. File a complaint with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency as well. JPMorgan is a nationally chartered bank regulated by the OCC, and a complaint to that regulator creates an additional official record and additional pressure for a substantive review. Freeze your credit at all three major bureaus immediately. Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion all allow you to do this online or by phone. Even if the fraud was focused on your bank account rather than your credit, you do not know the full extent of what information the scammers gathered about you during the period they had access to your account. Freezing your credit prevents new accounts from being opened in your name while you are still figuring out the scope of what happened. Change every credential connected to your compromised accounts: your online banking password, the email address associated with your banking profile, the phone number, if possible, your phone carrier account PIN, because SIM swapping, the practice of convincing your carrier to transfer your phone number to a scammer-controlled device, is a related attack that can be used to defeat verification systems. Enable the highest level of transaction alerts available on every account so that any movement generates an immediate notification. Consider consulting with a consumer protection attorney, particularly one who focuses on banking fraud and the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. The legal landscape here is complicated and fact-specific. There are circumstances under which a bank's denial can be successfully challenged, particularly if there are facts suggesting the bank's own security systems had vulnerabilities that a reasonable institution should have addressed. An attorney can assess whether your specific situation has grounds for a legal claim that goes beyond the initial fraud review. Here is the hardest and most important truth about all of this. Banks are designed to protect their systems. They are not designed to protect your mistakes or your trust, even when your trust was expertly exploited. When a transaction appears authorized in their records, when the verification codes were entered, when the technical markers of authorization are all present, they will treat it as authorized. The legal framework they operate under, as developed through decades of court decisions and regulatory interpretation, gives them substantial cover for exactly this kind of denial. The fact that you were deceived into providing the authorization does not automatically override the system's record that authorization was provided. This is not how it should work. The legal framework around social engineering fraud needs to change. The burden should not fall entirely on the customer when the attack exploited the bank's own verification infrastructure. Consumer advocates are pushing for those changes. Regulatory pressure is building, but the changes have not yet materialized into the kind of comprehensive statutory protection that would reliably prevent outcomes like Margaret's. Until they do, the protection you have is the prevention you implement, and the prevention is specific, concrete, immediately actionable, and it starts today. The rules are simple, even though following them requires retraining instincts that have been built around trusting institutions and cooperating with people who seem to be helping you. Never act on inbound contact from your bank. Always initiate contact yourself. Never share verification codes. Set wire transfer restrictions now. Separate your savings from your spending accounts. And treat every unsolicited communication claiming to be from your financial institution as potentially fraudulent until you have verified it through channels you established independently before any of this started. What happened to Margaret did not happen because she was naive. It happened because she was a trusting person who believed in the systems designed to protect her. She responded to a real JP Morgan alert. She answered a call that displayed JP Morgan's real number. She cooperated with someone who sounded exactly like a professional bank fraud specialist. In a world where caller IDs were meaningful and where verification codes were only requested by the institutions that sent them, everything she did would have been exactly right. That is not the world we live in. These rules exist because of the world we actually live in. Share this with the people in your life who are most likely to trust a call from their bank. Because the next Margaret does not have to be you or someone you love, but only if you know the rules before the phone rings.